Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of TYA, a part tea party, part talk show where I get to sit down with the latest and greatest TYA professionals, also known as Theater for Young Audiences professionals, to talk about their past, present, and vision for the future in this field. My name is Kira, and I am remarkably excited today, or I suppose tonight, it is night out outside, because we have not one, but two very special guests joining us today. They are both renowned internationally as one of the leading playwrights in theater for young audiences, and they have numerous awards under their belts. Truly, it would take an entire episode just to list them all to you. The difference is, one is tuning in from South Australia today, and the other is tuning in from right here in the United States. So everyone, please welcome Finegan, Kruckmeyer, and Suzan Zeder.
Hello, hello.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us today, friends.
Thank you for having us.
Good to be here.
Well, in the spirit of the pun that is this talk show's title, TYA, I thought that we would begin today by discussing what is your favorite type of tea?
Well, I have in my teacup right now, I have some orange pekoe with some manuka honey and a little bit of Egyptian licorice.
That sounds delectable.
It's amazing. Usually I drink Barry's tea, which is a very robust Irish tea I do love. Yeah, you know it?
I know it very well. Yep,
Cool.
yep.
Yeah, that's what we stocked the house with. But I thought, you know, because I've already had coffee this morning and stuff, I've gone for a ginger one. But now I'm just insanely jealous about yours, Suzan. That just sounds
I always put about 3 bags in a measuring cup, and then it gets me through most of the day. So
amazing. Amazing.
That's perfect. I'm actually drinking a rooibos tea today, which I have been drinking in most of these episodes thus far. I'm on a rooibos kick. But this one's kind of special because my neighbor from my hometown is actually a beekeeper. So he gave me honey from his bees, which is currently in this tea. So that's kind of fun.
excellent.
Yes.
I'm just so trumped by both of your amazing tea.
Now, I'm bragging on my honey because it's Manuka honey from New Zealand. Because I've been ill recently, I had a bad throat, etc. And the Manuka honey from New Zealand is fantastic and very healing.
Yes, yeah, it's such beautiful stuff. Oh.
Amazing. Well, make a note. If you ever have a sore throat, Manuka honey is the way to go. There's one thing you take away from this episode. Amazing. Thank you for those answers. They were all remarkable. So now thinking about TYA outside of the punisphere. There we go. Specifically your role as playwrights within the TYA industry. I would love to begin talking today about what drew you to playwriting in the first place.
Oh.
Do you want to kick off?
Go for it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, nice one. So I always knew that I wanted to be a writer in terms of that being an enduring pleasure that I felt initially as a reader, just that love of words developing that way, and then wondering if there could be a reciprocal element to it, whether they could be things that you put out as well as take in. I was also at the time part of a youth theatre, so I was getting up on stage and doing youth theatre stuff. And so correlating the love of words with a love of theatre, but not really yet making the association that I could do both parts. And so luckily I was steered in my late teenagehood towards the writing and given commissions by lovely, generous friends. And then the last 20 years have essentially been just a kind of a nuancing of that thing, kind of an ever greater appreciation of what words on a stage can be and what it is to hear language spoken as opposed to simply see it flat on a page, as much as I still very much love that quality. Just the joy of having a line delivered back to you by a beautiful actor and kind of hearing all the new detailing that they they kind of give to those words, you know, the new emotion that's imbued, or the embellishments they make, which are these lovely things that I never knew about that they discover. So that process of yeah, kind of being surprised by words ever anew has been the joy for me.
Great. Well, I saw my first play when I was 5. My mother gave me the option. I lived in Connecticut, just outside New York, and she gave me the option of either having a birthday party, which of course means to get all the presents, right, or going into New York to see a show. And I saw something that was totally wildly inappropriate for children, which was the making of my career. I mean, I knew from that moment sitting in the theater that I would have something to do with this magic place and this magic time. And I always thought as I was growing up that I would probably be an actor, but I'm not very good. And I also knew even in college that I would always get cast as the bossy best friend or the old aunt. And I knew that as an actor, I would never have the opportunity to have the number of voices that were in my head. And so I made that transition really from pursuing acting to pursuing playwriting very early on in college. And it was just this wonderful opportunity, as you've said, Finegan, to be able to connect the word with the passion, the moment, the emotion, and I've sort of never looked back. So I always knew it would be theater, and I'm very, very grateful for probably longer than most of you guys have been alive. It's been writing for me.
That's beautiful. I love that. Beautiful journeys to art for every writer, honestly. Hearing writers talk about how they came to playwriting is amazing. So feeding off of that, why specifically writing for TYA?
Okay.
You go first.
I will. And I never really intended that. I mean, when I was in college and really realizing that I probably was a writer and not an actor, I tended to be very influenced by other writers and other things that I had read. You know, if we were reading T.S. Eliot, I would write these really terrible, deep, dark plays in semi-poetic form. And I just kept wondering, what is my voice? What is my voice? Where, you know, what do I have to say? And then I was asked when I was in grad school to write the TYA show, which was an adaptation of an old folk tale that I know most of you are going to know, called Wiley and the Hairy Man. And I wrote Wiley and the Hairy Man probably 45 years ago when I was in graduate school. And all of a sudden, in the experience of working from the folk tale, working with actors, dealing with it improvisationally, I found everything I'd been looking for in theater and hadn't been able to find anywhere else. I found high stakes. I found a child hero that had, you know, humor and wit. I found a really interesting villain in the Hairy Man. I was able to use poetry. I was able to use magic. I was able to use terrible puns and a love of language. And all of a sudden, in the writing of that play, I realized now that's my voice. And so I have been led by my child characters and by the stories they have told me ever since that time.
That's nice. Yeah, I was going to say different stuff, I think, but I kind of, that notion of folk beginnings, I think I'll riff on that too, because that's true. There's something really lovely and enduring about those kind of stories. They are kind of passed through generations, and societies really covet those stories for particular reasons. You know, they play with allegory a lot. They tell us about the world without having to name the specificities of the world. And I think that's a really lovely kind of magic trick that those kind of folk tales and be it from any culture manage to do. And definitely the way that even when you write for adult audiences, you know, the way that you can touch onto some of these motifs or themes, or they hit something in us, something deep, and I don't think I realized that at the start of my aspirations in a professional sense was to write adult theatre, because that's when you've made it. You know, youth theatre is the thing you go through before the big achievement of writing for adult theatre. And then I kind of got to that point and realized those stories felt more literal and more obvious, and the lessons that were being imparted were kind of more didactic and heavy-handed, ironically, which is usually ascribed to to children's theatre, but I thought we all understand the convention too much in adult theatre. We know what we're doing and the magic isn't there. Whereas going back to TYA then became this epiphany again. Like the children aren't so well versed in what they should be as an audience, so they're more open-hearted and open-eyed and more willing. And the adults who sit with them think it's not for them, so unwittingly, unconsciously, they have the same willingness without knowing it to be affected by that. Yeah. And you just hit on those tropes, and you harken back to things that feel right in a human sense, in an existential sense, and you weave those into a story. Never as good as the classics, but with an aspiration to do that. And the feeling for me, the magic is that much more pleasurable.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you completely. And I think one of the interesting things here too is that as you begin to sit in an audience, a multi-generational audience, you realize that the one thing that every person in that audience has in common is that they either are or were once a child. So you have this kind of confluence of people coming together from different perspectives, viewing the same story, but from different ways in. And so I guess what I have loved, I never say that I write for children, and that's not to diminish writing for children. It is that I'm a little bit afraid that the minute you say you're writing for any one category, you're limiting yourself. So I've always loved saying I write about children. And because I think that's the one place that every person, no matter what their age in the audience, is coming together is from that touchstone.
Mm-hmm. I think we lost Finegan. Oh.
We lost him for a minute. He'll be back, I'm sure, I hope.
He'll be back. But what I was going to say was I'm actually a playwright myself, and what was so interesting is Laura Shellhart is one of my mentors. I know she's
wonderful. You're a lucky woman.
Truly, I am, and I know it. But after a couple of the plays I'd written, she turned to me and she was like, "Do you realize that you're writing TYA?" And I was like, I had no idea. Like I never went in with the intention of like, yes, this is theater for young audiences. I'm writing for children. But I think coming from those roots of like just happenstance falling into this very beautiful and magical genre to play within has really like awakened this new world of playwriting for me. Very much what you were talking about, Suzan, which has been.
And Kira, I think the best way to write for children is not to write for children. Do you know what I mean? Because then you have this category, you have this end product. You write with the depth of everything you are about both the child and the adult characters that happen to populate your stories.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then going back to the idea of fables and building off of these fairy tales that have lived with humanity for centuries. Finegan's coming back. Let me.
Is he coming back?
Hooray! Here he comes.
There he is. Fantastic.
Oh my goodness. Hello again.
Welcome back, my dear.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. Welcome back to the party.
Oh, that's ridiculous. This is one of the downfalls of communicating from far away. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Perfectly. And see you beautifully.
Really sorry.
No, it's okay. We were just talking about the fables and fairy tales that you both were touching on in your answers to that last question. And coincidentally enough, one of our playwrights for Playground actually incorporates a lot of Aesop's fables into her work. Ash and Feather, Sharon Francis is the playwright. And that is the first play that she's written. So it's interesting how that is such a touchstone of getting into these worlds and like the essence of this audience that the world is for.
You know, I think that's a great point, but it's got to be a leaping off point and not a destination. And Finegan, one of the things that I have admired about your work since the get-go is the sophistication of language and the sophistication of character and the fact that you have written so many original stories. stories that are not necessarily based on everything and, other titles or other things. And I think particularly in this time, certainly the pre-COVID time, we'll see what's going to happen in the post-COVID time. But one of the things, even though my first orientation into TYA was an adaptation of Wiley and the Hairy Man, I can really say that I don't think I would have ever had the career that I've had I been writing today as opposed to writing 30 years ago. Because I think that as the commercial market of TYA has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, the ability of theaters to be able to take risks on a story they've never heard about and a whole new original work. And so one of the reasons I was delighted to be paired with you in this interview is I think you've been the rock star of that for us in our profession. You have taken, your work touches back to these classic stories and classic themes, but your work also takes us forward into stories we've never heard about. And that to me is how we build a canon.
Well, that's very lovely of you to say. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's, every artist only exists in an ecosystem, in an environment of artists, and everything that I write is, whether I know it or not, informed by the things written around me and the other stories being told. So thank you, that's very nice.
Absolutely.
But yeah, definitely, like what you alluded to with producers, you can see this internal conflict, this schism between, sometimes the stories they want to tell, but the pragmatic decisions they have to make, and the assurances of the texts that have come before, and the sellability of those recognizable names. And it's a quandary, and I get it from both sides, how tricky it must be. But this very simple belief, and the very naive belief, and I'm naive in so many ways, is that a story which touches on these important intrinsic touchstones, irrespective of who it's written by, or where it's written, or whether it has to be sent across the seas, or whether it feels like now or 200 years ago. Those things will endure because we're hardwired in a certain way, and it's bigger than racism, and it's bigger than sexism, and it's bigger than homophobia. We know love, and we know kinship, and we know togetherness, and you just write about that and people get it. Like that's how simple it is, it feels like.
And speaking of writing these wonderful original stories, I was wondering, where do you both draw your inspiration from as writers?
I steal from Suzan's plays.
I steal from it again. I think a play chooses me more than I choose it, in kind of an interesting way. And, I'm very lucky that I've never had to make my primary living by being a playwright. I've always been a teacher or something else. So it has left me blissfully free to be able to allow myself to write the stories that come to me. Now, that's not to say that, I haven't had specific commissions from theaters that say we want to play about this, this, and this. But I think that, probably the work of mine that I am not necessarily the proudest of, because you actually love all your kids, but the work of mine that sort of has defined my career over an arc is the Ware trilogy. It's all the plays about Mother Hicks and Tuck and deafness in this little town. And each story just led me to the next one, which led me to the next one, which led me to the next one. The new piece, Clara Barton, which I'm not sure is a play for young audiences. It's not for young audiences, but it's also not necessarily for young audiences, is a play that came from a total lie. I mean, I had just done a play with Imagination Stage called When She Had Wings, which you guys in Northwestern may know something about because Reeves did a gorgeous production of it. And I was done. I'd finished the Ware trilogy. I didn't know if I had another play. And Kate Breyer from Imagination Stage asked me, what are you working on? And when Kate and I were working on When She Had Wings, we walked right past Clara Barton's house in Echo Glen. And I just casually mentioned to her, Oh, she mentioned to me, she said, if anybody would write a decent play about Clara Barton, who was the founder of the Red Cross and a healthcare worker, Civil War nurse, etc., she said that would be fascinating. And so when she called me, I wasn't working on anything and I was too embarrassed to tell her. So I said, you know that play about Clara Barton? And she said, yeah. And I said, well, I'm working on it. And then I immediately went to Wikipedia. I said, holy shit. And then the compelling nature of this woman's story just took me over and has taken me on the last 4 years of an odyssey that is wonderful and led right up until about maybe a half an hour today. So if you're lucky, they choose you.
Yeah, yeah, I very much agree. Yeah, I think we all, the notion of writer's block is kind of something that we can feel beleaguered by at times, but as much informed by other circumstances in our lives and how we're feeling. But the stories themselves, I think, are constantly swirling, just to sound a bit hippie and naff. Like there's innumerable stories, and were you to train your gaze on any person in the world and interrogate them and their circumstances, they would be a blockbuster. You know, like that story sits literally in everyone. I generally go from the jumping off point of a character. Kind of, I have a loose sense of who a character is, but then I get them to write a monologue. I write and hear what they're saying, and from that, my interest is piqued by whatever they're making apparent. You know, there are hurdles in the path to the thing that they want. There's a thing that they want. There's an antagonist. There's a love interest. There's a landscape in which they exist, which they were molded by, or which they, you know, push against. And then having done that initial very kind of flimsy and non-thorough interrogation, I kind of build out from there and just kind of see what the circumstances might be. So it is kind of always helmed by a protagonist, but then where it goes, and sometimes even they become the least interesting person in the story. The antagonist becomes so rich. I'm like, actually, I respect you, but you chill out for a bit. I'm going to chat with this one for a while. And then that becomes the bigger story. So yeah, it's this, I don't know, there needs to be a certain bravery to it. Hey, Suzan, like you need to just have faith in the way that the idea is rolling out, or the language that you're encountering. You know, you can't stymie it too early on. It's got to reveal itself. And sometimes that can be it can feel a bit bold, the way that you're just charging on without knowing where you're going. But then hopefully dramaturgically, you know, it kind of finds its way into a sense of meaning.
Right.
Okay. And since you're already talking about writer's block, you're so good at making my segues, Finegan. It's wonderful. Since we're already talking about writer's block, how do you two go about combating writer's block when it does happen?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, I am very Teutonic. I'm a Kruckemeyer, and so I kind of need that sense of regimen and discipline. And if the ideas aren't coming, I generally, like, I've just moved into a new house, and the last 2 weeks have been spent unpacking. And then when the study was feeling like a study and was kind of nicely established, then the ideas kind of flowed again. It had nothing to do with the ideas themselves. It was just about this environment which felt conducive to writing new stories, and kind of being brave enough to do that foolhardy thing. So yeah, the absence of distraction is one thing, and then also sometimes I get blocked by the sense, oh God, I'm so sorry, the sense of writing the same thing again. I can see myself getting too safe and kind of moving into too familiar territory, and kind of phoning it in and trying to write an equivalent story to one that I did already. And I've got to work against that. So it's not a block as such, but it's a lie to oneself. It's a kind of a pretending you're being productive, but actually just calling upon past successes. And so that forces me then, or I have to force myself to recalibrate, look in a new direction, and try to write something new.
I think it's important to know, I mean, I even hate that term, writer's block. I mean, it sounds like something you have to take an antacid or a laxative to get over, you know, and because I think that what we encounter, I wonder if you do, Finn, too, is we encounter a time of tensional possibility when we don't know where we're going, or we don't know what the next place is. And for example, I found this just today. I knew that something had to happen really close to the end of this piece. And I didn't know how to do it. And so what I had to do is to go right back to the very beginning and say, how am I creating this system? And every time I came up against it, I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how to do it. Didn't know how to do it. And I think part of what you have to do then is take a walk. You know, just literally get out of your space, take a walk, take a nap, do something physical to change your perspective or your point of view or your energy or your time. And then I had to come back, and this big project, the Clara Barton piece, is a big musical. And then I had to call my collaborator and say, you know, I'm thinking about cutting this, this, and this, and this. And she said, oh God, don't do that. You know, but then we talked sort of that through. She got me off the ledge. And then I said, you know, I'm just going to stop it and let them tell me what to do. And trust that my instinct is the right way to go. And don't continue to self-doubt. And so when I finally sat down and I said, you know, I'm making this much harder than it needs to be. I am creating the block because I'm frightened that I don't know how to do this. And then I just got out of my way and I let these two characters on stage tell me what to do. And I wrote back Jen and I said, it works, I think. And, you know, tomorrow it might not, but I think it's getting you out of your own way and your own doubts and your own fears that just say, I'm afraid this won't work, even before it doesn't, you know.
Absolutely. And and I feel that so much of writing is kind of being beholden to these two oppositional sentiments and working out which one you need to be driven by in that moment. One is the rigor of it and the dramaturgical nous to go, okay, well, this should theoretically lead to this and the impasse must be here and I need to fix this bit. And the other one, like you were saying, is a complete absence of that. And it's this thing where you kind of disappear for a couple of hours, you wake up and these words have come to be. This scene is existing in front of you, and it's this very antithetical to knowledge or learning thing. It's just this very innate thing, and we have to have both, I guess, because otherwise one play is two flights of fancy and the other one is too regimented. You need to kind of navigate both, but it's about, I guess, learning when to set aside each methodology so you can focus or be driven by the other one.
Right.
It's weird. We're weird. We're weird. So
I don't think so. I think this is great.
Yeah, I mean, if there's one thing I learned from my studies with Laura over the past 4 years, it's that regiment is just as important as allowing yourself space to daydream, like in between those writing sessions, and like scheduling yourself time to write. Also schedule yourself time to just live in the world in your head and walk around and see where it takes you, which
absolutely so much.
Lovely combination of what you were both saying. So we actually already touched on this next question a little bit. I know, Finegan, you were talking about how you start with a character and them writing a monologue, but my next question is about, what does your creative process look like once you come up with an idea? Where do you go from there?
Please.
Okay, here's what I'll do. I get an insight. I get a moment of something. I see a vision. I see the idea begins to percolate, and then I just have to follow it. So for me, usually it's a very intense period of feeding myself the raw materials of either what's the period or what's the subject. When I was working on When She Had Wings, I looked at everything from aeronautics to birds to Amelia Earhart to, I just fed myself with as much stuff, information, music, whatever, and then just allowed myself some real flexible time to play in that idea. And then you begin, there's a point when it starts to generate some idea of structure and form. And I think it's really important not to go to that point too quickly, not to second guess it, but to allow it. And I do an enormous amount of work in these little blue notebooks. And these are chemistry notebooks. I have probably, maybe 1,000 of them. And I love them because they are bound, so you can't tear it out and get rid of it. And so I spend a lot of time playing in these notebooks and you know, putting down an idea, putting down an image. But now finding it again is just hell on wheels, because they all look alike and you have no idea when was this. You know, I try to date them and go back, but the notebook isn't really where I'm writing. The notebook is where I go to talk to the play and to let it come to talk to me, and then just continue. Then you get to a wonderful time when you think you might have a structure that it could inhabit. And then I usually do some kind of an outline, just so that I know what comes first, second, and third. And then I sit down and start from the top, and then I can go to the computer. I cannot go to the computer before that, because I need to have just that kind of messy time to do that. And then I write about 1 billion drafts. I mean, it's not unusual for me to do 16, 17, 18 drafts of something before it ever even gets up. So I think it has to be something before it can be something else. You know?
That's great. And have those notebooks ever been accessed, like by students who study your plays? Are they a resource that could be looked at?
After I am dead, they can have them all. Right now, they would be so. No, actually, probably ASU's got way more of them than they should. But I don't even know how anybody would, you know, would make any sense of them. But, you know, sure. But,
wow,
you know.
it just seems so amazing as a thing to be scrutinized and pored over. I'm sure the ideas in there are many and beautiful. That's great.
I'm sure they are boring and repetitive.
My brother actually
I saw that.
so I'm going to send him looking for those notebooks. What were you going to say, Finegan?
Oh, I was just reading recently that Susan Orlean, who wrote The Orchid Thief, and she's just bequeathed a whole bunch, like all of these kind of notebooks to one particular university, and so it's like a library. They're all catalogued, and you know, they've done the thing that you said would be so arduous, Susan, of recognizing every time that word or idea is mentioned, and it becomes this amazing kind of web of beautiful ideas from a big brain. So great.
What's your process, love?
Sorry?
What's your process? How do you go from that spark to getting in the room?
I write to commission. That's the great vast majority of my plays have been written to commission. So I write these like 1 or 2 page treatments for a story which could theoretically exist but doesn't yet. And then when I talk with producer friends or director friends, I kind of show them those and say, do any tickle your fancy? And if one of those does, then that's what I embark on. Or they say no, and you know, we discover something new. And so I have this kind of, it's like a jumping off point, just a diving board, with some allusion to who the character might be, or what the circumstance might be, or the upset might be that needs to be usurped. And then, drop Mo off at school, come back, write in exactly his school hours, and Monday to Friday, and that's my regimen. But in terms of the idea, it's kind of that character as the inspiration point, and then them embellishing and kind of building out the world for me in a way, in an assisted way. And then it's all just quite quick and without much interrogation. I think this is maybe the first time in this interview where I'm hearing things that feel a bit divergent between us, in terms of, I don't think much, I'm not very clever, my process is kind of, it just blurts out. And I think the first instance is very messy and hasn't come from a lot of interrogation or introspection, really. It just kind of reveals itself, which means that the subsequent drafts entail a lot of polishing, because the ideas might exist somewhere in the piece, but they're not pretty yet. They don't have all the right interrelationships yet. You know, the macro world of the piece is kind of all out of whack. Like I've written lots of moments, but as an overarching story or mood or motif, it's not sitting right yet. It's not feeling right. So then it becomes this kind of retrospective process of kind of tinkering and trying to kind of smash it all into shape.
Well, you've got
with a lot of assistance.
Yeah, you've got to create the marble before you can sculpt it. I mean, and I think that's a wonderful, I think, that you're able to be that free in the initial thing to create a lot of material that you can pull from. What's sort of interesting for me is out of all, so many years that I've been writing, with this latest Clara Barton piece, this is the first play that I have written not on commission in my entire career.
Wow.
Now that is sort of amazing. And I resisted it because when we first started working with this, and I went back and sent a very early, terrible draft to two people. I sent it to Kate Breyer at Imagination Stage, and I sent it to Reeves Collins.
Yeah.
And Kate came back and gave me some great notes and said, kids don't study the Civil War till the 6th grade. And the minute I heard that, I thought, this play cannot be on commission, because I'm going to have too many exterior factors in my life that's going to shape that play in a way that this story may or may not need to go. So for the last 4 years, I have followed it, and I made a really determined effort not to go to another theater to develop it. I went to Reeves, and Reeves gave me the very first draft. My God, it's been 4 years ago. And we didn't even have music. We just went la, 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 la. And I mean, this is a huge musical. It's 8 women and about 23 songs. And so we went la, 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 la. And then I wrote back to UT, where I had been teaching, and 2 other schools, and said, will you develop this new piece with me? Because I want to see what it is before I take it to a theater. And so we are now about to go to American Music Theater Project, and we'll do something in April with it. And it probably will have to be, it may be live and it may be virtual, but this is the first time that I have totally been able to follow the tail of its kite, as opposed to always knowing where it was going to land. And Finegan, I think it's fabulous. It's so much fun. Yeah. And so I am not as attached to the outcome. I mean, I do hope it has a life. I do hope, in my dreamy dreams, I'd love it to go to Ford's Theater in Washington. And, maybe that'll happen and maybe it won't. But it's been the first time in my career that I've been able to actually follow it, as opposed to me tailoring it to its eventual destination.
Amazing. Well, here are very divergent kind of ways of working come back together, because I also am just in the process of writing my first play in years, which wasn't to any commission. Yay! And just doing all the giddy stuff that you're talking about, like this great unknown weirdness of it all. It's 100%. Everything
you send me a draft, I'll trade you. I'll send you mine, you'll send me yours.
Yes. Okay, I'll literally,
I would love that.
Cool.
So exciting.
Playwrights Unchained.
The title of this episode. Perfect. So I think this next question will be a fun challenge for the two of you. But if you had to distill the legacy or love letter or gift that you want to leave behind through the stories that you're writing into 3 words or less, what would those words be?
Wow. 3 or less? You're ridiculous.
Yeah. We could extend it if that's hard. It's like a thought or a sentence, but
so much of kind of the journey of being a writer is learning how to say more economically, I find. Like with each play, and down to 3 words is for, years ahead.
This is 4. Have fun, stay safe.
Nice.
I love it. It should go on a t-shirt.
I just, everything I say is naff, but I think it's just love. Like, I think all my plays are love stories. I just think that's what they are. Like platonic love, romantic love, familial love. I just societal love, environmental love of time and change. I mean, look what I've done. I started with 1 word and I've now become so verbose again. But yeah, let's stop there and say that.
Beautiful.
Yeah. It's a fun challenge for people who are in love with words to have to distill to just a select few. So thank you for playing along with me. Great. So our next question and our final question for this interview is, do you have any advice for up and coming playwrights and storytellers right now?
I'll just start with a kind of disclaimer that is that I'm always a little wary of advice, because like advice is so personal, and I think the advice I was given which really resonated with me wasn't necessarily the thing that somebody told me I should care about. It was this kind of incidental peripheral thought which made me go, oh yeah, that's a truism, I get that, and that resonates. So advice, but with a huge pinch of salt. Yeah, I mean, at the moment, I guess COVID and the being shut down and this notion of hibernation in the world, it feels like such a weird time to know how to write a story, because it's like, do we write about this societal ennui or this kind of this introspection? Do we name the thing that we're in, or do we work antithetically and give people the story of escapism and what will come next? And it's really tricky. So I would maybe, the advice would be maybe to grapple with that conundrum and decide for yourself where you fall in that huge scale of things. You know, are you going to be the journalistic interrogator of what this is and name it for us because nobody can really name it? Or are you going to be, you know, the far-fetched fantasist who's going to be giving us this amazing journey we can go on, which has nothing to do with this? So even if we're helmed in some way, we have great vast seas to travel. Or do you exist somewhere in that journey in between? I mean,
I'm not really sure if this is advice, but I find this whole period of pandemic and COVID and isolation and quarantine to be a very curious and possibly incredibly creative time. I think my own feeling is that, you know, over the years, as we have watched TYA come into its ascendancy professionally, because, you know, when I first started writing, we were all sitting in the back of vans and doing plays and colored jumpsuits and cubes, and, you know, the big theaters were still in their infancy. And I have watched the professional rise of TYA in this country with very mixed emotions. Because on the one hand, I have been so excited by the changes of artistry and the deeper professionalization, and writers such as you, Finn, coming into this and, you know, finding new stories and new ways of telling it. But then I became somewhat distressed in recent years because of where the commercial stakes became so high with so many theaters, that theaters were not able to take the same kind of risks that they had made their careers on when they started. So I have felt that our whole field, maybe our whole world, is due for a course correction. Now, I would never have wanted or wished this on anyone, because this kind of course correction is kind of, you know, draconian, shall we say. But I really don't know who or what this field is going to be when we come out the other side. One of the other hats that I wear, and I'm really pleased to be able to be doing this, I'm currently the president of the Children's Theatre Foundation of America. So one of the things that we're trying to do is to say, where is the field and how can we help coming out of COVID? How, you know, what do we need to be saying? Who are the artists we need to be supporting, and that kind of stuff. So I think one of the things that this has done is it's given us, all bets are off in terms of what will succeed or where we will go. And I think in sort of a Brave New World philosophy, it's going to be made one writer and one play and one theater at a time. And so I think the only advice I would say is have courage, have hope, and tell your own story. Those would be just the three things that I would say, because I have no idea who we're going to be on the other end. But if I never see another Pinkalicious, if I never see another, you know, adaptation of the quote unquote commercial title, I will think this was a good thing.
Cool.
Wow.
That's good.
Wow, thank you both for those nuggets of wisdom. They're truly priceless. I'm like mentally making notes right now. So speaking of up-and-coming playwrights, my theater company, the Purple Crayon Players, is producing the Playground Festival of Fresh Works, in which 3 amazing professional playwrights get to come and workshop their new works with our undergrad actors and undergrad directors, and they then get to produce these plays in a series of staged readings, this year virtual staged readings, for audience members just like you to come and witness and to help develop alongside them. So if that is something that you are interested in, please check out any of our social media platforms. You can reserve your free ticket there. We are on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram. You can check out our website, purplecrayonplayers.com. Truly anywhere, you can't miss us. And then as for our lovely guests, they do have some exciting projects coming up. I know Suzan Zeder has mentioned the Battlefields of Clara Barton a couple of times in this conversation. It's been in development for 4 years now, and sounds like quite a passion project, so it can't be missed. It's going up in April, right, Suzan?
Right, with the American Music Theater Project, directed by Reeves, and we'll see what it looks like. I mean, one of the things that was interesting to me is I said, okay, what we have to do is stop thinking about what would we do if we were live and start thinking about what can we do if we're not. And so that's getting to be kind of exciting. But Finn, I want to hear what you've got going. What's the project that's the most exciting for you right now?
Well, this one that kind of was born of no master or mistress, that, this story that just presented itself towards the end of last year. It's actually called Hibernation. It's about the whole world going to sleep for a year, just so that environmentally we can it can regroup and the planet can kind of have the time it needs to take a breath without all of us. So everybody in bed for a year and then.
No.
Oh, I think we're suspended. We're in hibernation.
Okay. This is actually a giant advertisement for hibernation. Well, hopefully he comes back and we can finish talking about that. But in the meantime, the conversation definitely is not ending here. I've also asked our guests to come in with a gift for our audience members, our viewers, you out there, which Suzan and Finegan have so lovingly filmed as separate videos because there was just too much amazement to fit into one episode. So go and check those out and all of the love and care that went into them. You won't want to miss them.
I have to do it now, don't I?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I know, I haven't done it yet, but I will.
Be there.
I will.
Yeah, you're committed now.
Well, I wish really good luck to all of you, all of the playwrights that are doing this. And I'm going to ask you, Kara, if you will send me links, because I'm really bad about social media. So if there's something for me to see, I'm good about clicking on a Zoom link, but I'm terrible about, actually seeking it out. So I'd love to know more about these pieces. And I promise I'll send a gift soon. I just haven't done it yet.
Amazing. Yeah, I'll be sure to send those links your way. I'll type up a nice email and you'll find that in your inbox.
And if you get Finegan back, tell him to send me that play. I want to see it.
Oh yeah, it has to happen. We have a verbal contract in this video now.
Oh, yes, we do. Thank you, Kira.
Of course. Thank you, Suzan, for coming. And I don't know if we're going to get Finegan back, but if not, I will have him type up a nice little description of Hibernation, and we will leave that in the description so you can hear all about it and the lovely work that he's doing.
Got it.
Amazing. Yeah. So in the meantime, thank you again so much for coming, Suzan, and thank you to all at home for tuning in with us. See you next time. Cheers.
Got it. Cheers. Mm-hmm.
Oh, he's coming back.
Oh, wait.
Good. Hold your horses.
I will. There he is. He's back.
That is bonkers. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
That could not have been better timed. We all went into hibernation for a minute. Keep going with that.
Literally mid-sentence, my computer just died. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay.
We talked about my being a Luddite before we started this, and I guess that's one of the things normal people would check on, but yeah, sorry.
No, that's okay. Did you want to, you were talking about hibernation when you froze. Did you want to?
Oh, just only that it was this very strange thing in that, yeah, it was about this notion of everybody taking a year off from kind of being beings walking around the world and using resources, and what would happen to us if we then all woke after a year, discovered what the planet had become, how the wilderness had kind of encroached again into our lives, and discovered whether we kind of recreate the social systems that existed before or build new ones. And then in February, kind of the world suddenly undertook this exercise in kind of taking a step back and shutting its doors and living these much more internalized, introspective lives. And we're still in many places of the world and very much thinking of you and your countrymen and women. You know, you're contending with this right now, and yeah, so it's just been this weird thing of the planet kind of dramaturging me as I've been writing this piece. But then that goes up next year. That's what I was going to say. The play goes on next year. So that's
I'd love to see it, Finn. Send it to me. I'd love to see it.
We'll do.
I want to know what's going to happen on the other side of our quarantines. That's great.
Yeah, it's very speculative, but yeah, cool.
I actually have a really good book that I think you should read, Finegan, after hearing about hibernation. It's written by Stephen King, and I will email it to you so you can take a look. But it's one of my favorites, and it feels like it marries very well with that concept.
Oh, I love it. Thank you. Yeah, I love a good recommendation.
Of course. So everyone at home, keep your eyes out for Hibernation and the Battlefields of Clara Barton. Thank you again, once more, for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.
Thank you much.
Bye.
Bye.